Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and I'm delighted to welcome a senior professional from the world of marketing and public relations from Lexington, Kentucky, USA, Mr. Stephen Seidel. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ash, for having me on. It's an honor to be
Thank you.
here and congratulations on all the success.
Thank you. Stephen is the founder and owner of the Seidel Agency. He's a speaker, a storyteller, and a strategist. So, Stephen, before we start talking about the Seidel Agency, a few questions for you. You've spent over 25 years in marketing, media, and PR. What first drew you to this field, and how has your vision evolved over the years?
That's a great question. I think, your podcast is called The Brand Called You. So I think we're all very unique in our own right. And so a lot of who we become happens in our childhood.
Hmm.
And so as a child, my parents were divorced. And so my dream became to be a great father. And so
Hmm.
giving back to my children, future generations, as well as the vulnerable children that live within all of us. And so my dad was often traveling, but he was a really brilliant storyteller.
Hmm.
He was able to tell a story and really bring you in, as was my mom. She was an entrepreneur. And so for me, I saw the value of story. I grew up watching movies. I would go to the movies every weekend and was just really moved by these experiences. And at the core of what it was the story we tell ourselves, but also the story that we can, confide ourselves in, and the story that moves us. And so as I
Hmm.
began to move forward, I was in between my mother and my father. They were divorced. I became a people pleaser. And so I learned quickly the value of connection. How
Hmm.
can I connect to my mom? How can I connect to my father? How can I connect to others so that I feel as if I belong? I kind of felt when I was younger that you know, didn't want my mom to run away or my dad to run away or my friends to run away because I've seen people leave in the past. So my skill became to connect. And
Hmm.
the true connective tissue of connection and connection as currency is story. And so that's
Amazing.
how I evolved into media, public relations. And at the end of the day, building that brand, it all comes back to story and the story we tell ourselves, the story that we share, and then the story that we look to build.
What a great response. Thank you. From working with Fortune 500 companies to building men's collectives like Gents Journey, what has been the most fulfilling part of your personal and professional journey?
That's a great question. So, in terms of fulfillment, I think as a creative, I grew up, I went to school as an engineer. My parents kind of forced me to the engineer path, and then I found acting and entertainment and expression. And so I was combining the left brain and the right brain. So for me, it's finding something where I can, dive deep into that creative process, then also see some of the impact that it's delivering from more of an analytical perspective. So I began noticing a couple of years ago that a lot of the things that I wanted to push forward, such as, selling a TV show or a podcast,
Hmm.
doing a TED talk, or actually telling the story of one of my college roommates. His name's Larry Lavin. I had a successful podcast. It's called Wolves Among Us. But these things took 20 years. And so there's no such thing as an overnight sensation. But to me, seeing something through and really remaining resilient, especially when you're, navigating through telling stories, pitching projects where rejection happens every single day. I think
Hmm.
failing forward and being able to see these projects through is really gratifying. And, as I get older, I realize that the moments that are the most challenging or the toughest, for example, my TEDx talk, The Hidden Power of Grief, are really these epiphanies where it allows us to break through. And what we go through, we grow through. And I talk quickly about grit when I work with C-suite coaching, gratitude, resilience, integrity, and trust. And this helps
Hmm.
us remain on that path and see these projects through to fruition. And when I can create something and it impacts somebody, whether it's one person or a million, to me, that's success.
Well said. Let's now talk about the Seidel Agency. You describe your agency as helping clients make an impact, inspire positive action, and empower audiences. How do you bring this mission to life in practice?
Thanks for asking. So at the Seidel Agency, we've been in existence for about 10 years. And so when I first started, I had a close friend of mine, and this all goes back to connection as currency. When we build our connection, especially in the age of AI, from a personal connection, face to
Hmm.
face, eye to eye, heart to heart, this will reap its benefits long term. And so my best friend mentioned this company needed some help.
Hmm.
And so I came on board, and then we ultimately got that company acquired. But
Hmm.
while building the Seidel agency, I wanted to remain true to myself. And so
Hmm.
for me, I created the mission to do good, give back, and make an impact. So every
Hmm.
client that we worked with, I wanted to
Hmm.
make sure that there was a socially conscious component, whether
Hmm.
it's a charity, you're giving back to a community, or you're doing something that's impacting the world in a positive way.
Right.
And so we saw with the pandemic, there was a lot of people, voting with their dollar and going towards local communities. And then that really started to take shape, or Tom's Shoes, or different companies where it's buy one, give one. And so as an organization, we look for companies, large or small, that are positively impacting the world and generating a win-win-win for the company, the consumer, as well as the community. And real quickly, the way that we do that is we have a four-step process. We
Hmm.
start with your mission. There's a Venn diagram of your skills, your passions, or
Yeah.
ultimately your positioning. And then we really lean in on your mission. And then next step is, what's that message? How can we identify who your target audience is and show them what it is that you do so that when they hear what your message is, they understand, oh, they're talking to me. And then lastly, we go towards the media or the marketing sense. Too often
Hmm.
people market first when they don't understand that true foundation of who they are,
Hmm.
what their brand is, what do they stand for, what are they against. And so once we move in from mission, then we go to message and then media. Lastly, we want to build a movement like Taylor Swift or Beyonce. But if you stand for something, then we can build a movement so that people vote with their clicks, they vote with their dollar, they vote with their time.
Hmm. Great response. In an age of AI and automation, why do you believe human connection is still the ultimate competitive advantage?
I mean, sure, that's a great question. And so empathy at its core is probably one of the most important parts of what we do.
Hmm.
We talk a lot about it in my men's group that I created. My mom passed, and so I created this men's group, Gents Journey, as
Hmm.
a way to cope with a lot was going on. I didn't have friends locally because I've run a virtual business and had relocated. I also, my clients were virtual, and so I needed a community to ultimately share my story with. So first, I had to reconnect to who I was. What was my mission? What was that story? What was I on this earth to do?
Hmm.
Secondly, I needed to rebuild this community around me because we are a product of the five close people around us. We're not a
Hmm.
product of the five most uh, robots or technology. And then lastly, I had to reconnect to my purpose, my power, and my story. And
Hmm.
so empathy in the age of in the age of AI is crucial because that network that we're building, the connection that you and I are having, the friends that we're speaking with, are the ones that we're ultimately gonna find ourselves connecting with, sharing our story, and hopefully impacting. We can't necessarily impact a robot. So if you're
Hmm.
wanting to impact somebody, it's building that story that someone can connect to and be moved by. And with human connection,
Hmm.
that is a soft skill, right? AI is a hard skill. So yes, you can still use AI, right, to figure out ways that you can position yourself, share your story in more in an impactful way. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, looking you eye to eye, heart to heart, separating ourselves 18 inches from our head into our
Yeah.
heart is ultimately how we're going to connect and inspire others to change in this world.
Hmm. And yet AI is here to stay, Stephen.
It is.
How is the Seidel agency preparing to meet the challenges and opportunities of AI-driven marketing?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, like I said before, we want to couple the soft skills of connection and really storytelling and knowing truly who we are,
Hmm.
or our clients per se, or the coaches that we work with, so that, yes, their stories are changing. It's different than when my father worked. He worked at the same company for
Hmm.
25 years,
Hmm.
Sperry, Univac, Unisys. But now our careers are changing. And so understanding how our careers are changing, our wants, our needs, what we're really passionate about, and finding ways that we can position ourselves in a field or a career where we have that cultural alignment is
Hmm.
crucial. But then with the AI perspective, yes, you can automate phone calls, you can automate, text messages, but really finding out how are we going to do that so it has a voice, much
Hmm.
like building a brand. So does that voice represent you? If you're going to automate who you are or your vision, your likeness, your name, image, likeness, is that representative of you? Maybe you're short on time. You want to
Hmm.
use that as an avenue. that's your option. But when
Right.
working with individual companies, we utilize AI in any number of ways when it comes to analytics, identifying trends, automating things that are monotonous, that typically might have used a virtual assistant or a remote assistant where they're stepping in. And then just identifying the needs. So we're working with another company where they work with jail cell calls, and they were looking to identify potentially people who were involved with, escaping. And so if you look at 900 hours of calls, if you were a human and you wanted to listen to 900 hours of calls, it's going to take a lot of time. But
Mm.
if you're AI, you can scrub those 900 calls, check it out for keywords, and then potentially identify individual areas. So that can be applied to customer calls, sales calls, you name it. You can pull out the important information so that you can determine essentially what's most important. But then it comes back to the human element so that we determine ultimately what we can do with that and integrate that.
Very interesting. Stephen, you've also created digital programs like for platforms like e-online. How do you see the role of digital media evolving to shape brand narratives?
Yeah, I think we're seeing it now with music evolving. There's musicians that are AI, there's actresses that are AI. And so that ever-changing landscape, traditionally in the past, if you were a brand and you wanted to do an ad, you would do a casting call and you would find
Mm.
individuals that met that casting need. Now you can use something like Google, Veo, or other platforms where they can ultimately create what they want in seconds, in minutes. But I do think it's still vital and important to value the process, the people
Mm.
that are involved in creating that, whether or not that's gaffers, whether or not that's lighters, that's
Mm.
performers, that's the producers, so that we can value the overall creative process. And at the end of the day, a computer doesn't necessarily have some of these experiences. Yes, it can simulate what it might be, but our unique story is what matters most. And that is how we can connect with others.
Mm.
For example, my mom passed away, and I did a little vignette in my TEDx talk about
Mm.
going to uh, get a Happy Meal at McDonald's. And it was always those 5 minutes that I cherished and getting those fries at the bottom of the bag and
Mm.
sharing those with her because it was those moments where it was a selfless moment where I could be of service. We all know the best fries anyways, but looking back, those moments were just so special because we were just there being, there's nothing else in this world that mattered
Mm.
besides her and I. And when you think of creating a brand or telling that story, I don't know that that story can arise from AI because AI hasn't gone through and had a
Correct.
Happy Meal and
Correct.
shared that moment with its mother. It may find ways to simulate that, but the rawness and the irreverence around that story, I think, really speaks volumes. So if I were to reach out to McDonald's and they wanted to share stories of moments together, I feel like
Mhm.
that story would be powerful.
Mm.
So it's going to be a combination of leveraging, like I said before, the technology, but also the stories behind individuals and how they've interacted with the product or the
Mm.
experiences that they've had.
Well said. When you consult on branding and marketing, how do you help companies stay authentic rather than trendy?
Oh, that's a great question. So, when working with a company, a personality, an organization, it goes back to what I discussed before. We're going to go back to the mission, the five highest commitments that you have as an organization, whether it's personal or professional. What are the commitments that you're honored towards? For example, I mentioned Tom's Shoes earlier. They were committed to helping third world countries have shoes so that they could survive. And so we go back to essentially that Venn diagram where we have your passions, we have ultimately what your skills are, and then we have your positioning. And
Mm.
so, for example, if you're an individual who loves sports, your passion is sports. I love sports. I love to be in a team environment. And then your positioning. For example, I'm in Kentucky. Let's say you live
Mm.
in Louisville, Kentucky. That's your positioning, and you have some interest around sports. Then, lastly, the skill set that I have is storytelling, or I have an interest in history. So if you put all those things together, you could determine I'm in Louisville. I love sports. I love talking about history. I love sharing stories. It may be a great opportunity for me to work for a company like Louisville Slugger. So
Mm.
Louisville Slugger is a baseball company. And
Yeah.
so that checks all of those boxes where I could be a tour guide. I could work from a marketing perspective. I could work from a
Mm.
sales perspective. And so it's really honoring who you are from a personal and a professional basis.
Mm.
And then there's another really cool, we do various exercises to really dig deep into what's most important as a company,
Hmm.
the cultural alignment, and who you ultimately want to serve and deliver an impact towards.
Mm.
If you're seeking personally, there's a really great exercise that I learned when I was an actor and an entertainer. It's from a
Hmm.
book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And
Okay.
she said, go back to your childhood. Think about the five things that you wanted to be when you grew up.
Hmm.
For me, it was an actor, it was an entertainer, it was a fireman, it was a police officer, and then an athlete. And so, how can you find ways to inject these within your daily life? So
Mm.
maybe once a day you can put one of these things. So for an actor, maybe I go to the CVS, the local market, and I do an accent or something
Mm.
fun so that you instill that sense of play.
Mm.
And so when working with brands and their authentic self, we want to make
Hmm.
sure it's fun. If it's fun, it gets done. We want to have a sense of play. And then we ultimately want to make sure that we're being true to ourselves and that we focus on loving who we are and the mission and your highest calling so that once we do that, we can impact others around us.
Well said. And what role does humor and heart play in the way you craft client messages?
I think humor is everything. I think at the end of the day, it's more of a synthesizer. It brings down our armor. And so when we work with clients, we want to determine how can we be self-deprecating. So you
Mm.
look at any sitcom, and there's always the dad who's the self-deprecating dad, and then there's the mom who's a little bit more analytical, but she's funny as well and there to support. But that's why sitcoms are popular. That's why comedians can do comedy and they can do drama because you can relate to them. You see yourselves in me as a mirror. So
Hmm.
the more that we can laugh about, for example, our most embarrassing moment, which I talk a
Mm.
lot about, or these are
Mm.
questions that we ask. And within that humorous element, if we can laugh it off, then that actually gives us a spike of endorphins, the serotonin levels rise, and we're more at ease. We bring ourselves with more confidence. And so anytime we're building that story, we want to find some minor elements, especially when speaking, right? You're on stage, you're doing a speech. Like I talked about the fries at the bottom of the bag. When I talk about that, I say, "Oh, we all know those are the best fries, right?"
Mm.
Or different ways where we can ultimately, because we can't be serious all the time, we need a breather so that we
Sure.
can take a moment.
Sure.
I've been talking a lot, so I took a
Mm.
moment as well, but to have
Okay.
that breather. And so part of what we've done in my men's health group, I don't know if you're going to get to this or not, but
Hmm.
I created a men's group called Gents Journey.
Uh-huh.
And after 4.5 years, this was after my mom passed away. This was a safe space for me to share stories and
Hmm.
heal. Because vulnerability is an invincibility, and humor, vulnerability, these are all key components towards being a leader.
Mm.
We have a lot of questions that came out of the meeting. And so we put them on cards, and there's some funny ones.
Hmm.
What's your favorite sandwich? There's also some
Mm.
serious ones. When was the last time you cried? But we don't have to have all the answers. We just have to realize that we can ask the questions and see what story arises.
Mm.
So I'd like to ask you one of the questions if
Sure,
you don't
sure,
mind.
sure. By all
And I,
means.
and I talked about what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Hmm.
This reminds me, this is a way that I inject the magician in my life because it feels like
Hmm.
a card trick, but really the magic is in your answer. So tell me when to stop, and you're going to answer one of these
Stop.
questions.
Mm. Stop.
Okay. So the question that you have, and I would encourage the listeners to think about this question as well and share it with a friend because the
Mm.
true connection happens when you share that story.
Mm.
That's how we will overcome with AI and all of the human robots. What
Okay,
are
what are the
three
three
things
things you
that
love
you
about yourself? Well, I can respond to you quickly about that. Number one is self-discipline. That is very, very clear. I tend to be very highly disciplined in everything that I do. Number two, I'm extremely close to my both my sons. One's in Singapore, one is in the US, in Minneapolis. And third, I was extremely close to my parents and have a very, very strong, and now as the head of the family, across the entire spectrum, I do believe that I am like a glue for the entire family.
I love that. I feel very similar. You're the connective tissue. You are the connector. Thank you for sharing that. And that's essentially what we look to do is
That's
now that I've
fantastic.
learned that, I know that you have two
So,
sons that you
yeah,
have, and we can connect over our sons. And this is how those seeds of connection begin to take shape. Instead of asking, what's the weather like? What kind of cell
mm,
phone? What are you doing this weekend? Go
yeah,
deeper. We're only on this earth for a short time. Tell
yeah,
those you love them why you can.
correct, correct. Wonderful. Stephen, I have time for two more questions for you. Um, since you spoke about Gents Journey and you said that you created it after your mom passed, tell me a little bit more about Gents Journey and what has been the reaction of this amazing institution that you have created.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So, like I said, during the pandemic, I relocated my business, my family. I had a 1 year old. I bought a new house. And then I found out my mom was diagnosed from cancer. And so, as a male, I was a male caretaker, which you don't see as much as you do potentially from a female perspective. But I was operating my business from my home, and I had to put my mom in the extra bedroom because we had just relocated. We were a virtual company. And so I was running my business from my laundry room, and it was probably one of the most challenging times on top of having this pandemic happen,
Right, right.
limited in clients. I had to figure it out. My family was relying on me. My mother was relying on me. I was relying on me, and there was no other option, and I had nowhere to turn. And so I just took a few moments. I joined a group. It was called Meditation Hill Sangha, which was a nice community. It's run by the former Sixers coach, Pat Croce. And so it was a great place for me to share and to start to get in a place where I could get my mind right because it's all mental. And so I started to change a little bit and I realized I needed a support system. And so I reached out to my five closest friends that were entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are risk takers. They go outside the box. Also knew that they were family men, they were fathers. So much like you and myself, they had children. So I knew that they were in a great place. And then lastly, I knew that they were businessmen, so they could also provide simple, wins that I could potentially integrate at my own business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we began having weekly meetings and we talked about everything from our children to our businesses. One man was going through bankruptcy. I went through the loss of my parent. Another gentleman was being sued by a company for, intellectual property issues. So it ran the gamut, but we were all in a place where we had lost something. But what we really needed was a place that we could share stories and be open and vulnerable. And so each week we began to meet, and slowly we saw the impact, and we realized there aren't very many tools out there for men's mental health.
Correct.
There's tools for men, whether or not you're fixing a car or
Yeah.
building your house, but from a mental health perspective, there weren't a lot of tools out there. You can go to Barnes and Nobles, you'll see tons of books for the expectant mother or for
Mm,
women. And so we thought to ourselves, what is a way that we can take this experience and give it to other men, especially now when
mm,
the younger generation, they're more disconnected than ever. They're gaming, they're not going outside of their house. That face-to-face connection that we've been talking about is
mm,
crucial to our overall growth. Um, and so essentially we said we needed a tool to create. So we created Gents Journey. We shared that with other individuals so that they could create their own meetings. We created the Journey Deck, which are just simple ways that men can be open and connect and start the gift of conversation. And then we created a newsletter with a lot of trainings on ways that we can connect or we can be
mm.
better dads. And so we've just started just recording videos naturally, putting them on YouTube, and slowly but surely subscribers are coming around. They're seeing the value, and our Substack is up to 6,000 members. And we focus on the 7 pillars of manhood because we want a well-rounded overall man. We
Mm,
have family, friendship, focus, fitness, fun, freedom, and then I think that's 7. If that's
mhm.
not, I'm missing one. But
Yeah,
so essentially, that's what we do. We send out weekly notifications. We interview other men about their experiences so that we can all see ourselves in them, much like a mirror.
yeah.
This is all an example. This is what we're going through. You know it. I know it. You have issues that you deal with your, spouses, your sons,
Mm, mm.
everything. But if we have people that have gone through it that we can share it with, then we can really work towards change.
Fantastic. Stephen, on that note, I just want to say what a fabulous conversation this has been with you. Thank you for talking to me about your own journey. I think we covered some fascinating ground on the Seidel agency, on your win-win-win strategies, on make an impact and inspire positive action and empower audiences. And you also told us at some length about the Gents Journey, which seems to be an absolutely fascinating concept. And I'm going to try and figure out how I can get those cards
Yeah,
for
could
using
I
them
share? So
someday.
if you go to Gents Journey, Gents
Yeah, yeah.
journey.co/join,
Hmm.
that'll take you into our Substack community. It's totally free. And then you can learn more about the cards. The cards are available on Amazon. It's the Journey deck from Gents Journey. And then I also wanted to let you know you're building brands across the world. If you
Mm.
are building a brand, your authentic brand, and you need some help, happy to help you. But we have a really cool tool that'll give you 4 platforms that you can get your own press. So part of building that authentic brand is
Mm.
truly sharing your story.
Okay.
So if you go to stephenseidel.com/media, so that's StephenSeidel.com/media. That'll be a free PDF you can download, and it'll give you platforms where you can elevate your brand and elevate
Sure.
your story. And
Thank
I
you.
would love to connect across social media. It's at Stephen Seidel or at the Seidel Agency or
Okay.
at gentsjourney.co.
Okay. Thank you again for talking to me and all the very best to you.
Thank you so much, Ash, and thank you for being such a leader and setting such a positive example.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.